Hi everyone, welcome to Northern Zen Yoga. My name is Sandra, and today I'm creating a series of videos for you to help you to learn to modify your yoga practice without having to be told to go into this modification. Some videos, and quite frequently when I'm doing mine, I may forget to add the modifications in, and other people that you may watch on YouTube may do the same thing, but you are welcome to do the modifications that I'm showing you today. It's perfectly okay. It's what works for you. Yoga is not a perfect science. We all have to adjust our bodies to fit the form. And as long as we're feeling a good stretch, we're doing it. So one of the other yoga practice poses that we often find people have difficulty with is coming down onto the knees and doing a child's pose or sitting in lightning pose or hero pose. So these ones involve pressing your knees a little more into the floor. If you have issues with the knees, and most people as they get older, they start to have this problem, they find that their sensitivity on the mat is pretty high. So there's a couple of things you can do. The first thing you can do is you can have a block. You can have a block, and I just realized I have to go get a block. So here I have a blanket and a block, and these become quite handy whenever we're trying to do our modifications, especially floor modifications. So if I have to get down onto my knees, and my knees are very sensitive, there's a number of things you can do. The first thing you could do is you could take an old yoga mat or a very cheap yoga mat you can buy at the dollar stores, and you can cut it into strips, and you can use those strips in any number, pile them up, and use them as extra cushioning on the mat. Now, sometimes you can actually buy mats that are extra thick and extra impact absorbent. I have one, not this one in particular, but I have one, a jade mat, which I use, and it's been very helpful in helping me to be able to kneel longer and do a lot of the practice poses, especially when I first started yoga, that my bones were a little bit less used to being on them than they are now. The other thing you can use, of course, is your block. You can use a block to sit on, and I'll show you how to do that. And you can also, for your knees, use a blanket if you don't want to be cutting up yoga mats. So let's get down onto the floor, and we're going to work on the pose, hero pose, to begin with. So in hero pose, our object is to sit down onto our heels and relax our weight down. So for many of us, when we first start yoga, we can't do this. I couldn't do this. So what you can do is you can use the block. And the block has lots of sides to help you here. When I first started doing the hero pose, I had to sit on the high side of the block. This was still a lot of stretching happening in the front of my legs. So if this is where you're at, this is where you need to be. As long as you're feeling it, you're doing it. So if this feels like not enough stretch happening, you can then switch to the next side down. And you can perch yourself on the block, and it's just raising you up just a little bit higher than your heels would be. And because the block is more sturdy, you're not going to sink as much. So you can use it from here. Now you can also flip it over and add a blanket. Pressing the blanket into the thighs, closer to the thighs and the knees, you'll find this is nice and cushy, and you'll probably still feel a stretch here. I can still even feel a little bit of a stretch, but it'll be just that little bit more comfortable or doable than it would be if you were to let go and try to sit down to your heels. So what we don't want is to have you doing this. You don't want to be leaning forward and pressing into your thighs because it hurts too much to go any further. Make sure you're using as many of the props that you have as possible. Now it's even possible to put a bolster, one of those big thick cushions, underneath between thighs and calves, but you might find that it's so cushy that you're forced forward again. So let's work with trying to get blankets and blocks to work for us first. The next posture we're going to look at in the kneeling position is going to be child pose. So some people find child pose equally as difficult because of the fact that we're supposed to keep our bottom as close to our heels as possible and bring our head down to the floor. Now in the beginning, this is pretty difficult to do. It looks easy when you see me do it, but it's not so easy when you have to do it when your body is stiff. So what we're going to do in this case is we're going to use the block again. And again, even if you need to, you can add blankets on top of your block to help build up a little more height. And we're going to try to keep the bottom down, and we're going to place the forehead onto the block. You'll still feel it. If you're this deep down into your feet and heels, and you've got your head here, you're going to feel it. What I don't want you to be doing is this. That pretty much, except for putting pressure on your knees, is not doing much for you. So, if needing the blanket and the block is too much, you don't feel any stretch happening up your back, then you're going to take the next step down, of course, to the high side of the block. And then we can work our way slowly down till we get toward the floor. If you're using this block and you're on the lowest side and you're feeling you're not getting enough stretch in your back, your head still doesn't quite touch the floor, that's okay. Someplace between this level and the floor, you can let your head float as long as you're not lifting up your bottom off of your heels in order to get closer to the floor. What we're going for in the child pose is, yes, you're going to be stretching the front of your legs. You're going to be putting a little bit of pressure into the knee joint. But you're also wanting to feel this lovely stretch going all the way up from the low spine to your crown here. When you're coming across your legs, you're actually arching your back, you're stretching out all of the vertebrae. All of the vertebrae have a chance to open up and start to uncompress. And that takes a lot of pressure off of your spine. It's actually quite relaxing once you're able to do it completely. And if this is where you're at in your yoga practice, where you're here, you've got maybe another block on top and a pillow, but you're still feeling a nice stretch coming up your back as you try to lean into it, you're doing yoga, so don't worry about it. Thanks a lot for watching this video. I'll see you in the next time. Bye.